The other big news that happened over the weekend was New Orleans, and I think this just gets spurred on by what's happening off the court with Zion Williamson, right? While you look at the Pelicans, they never took that next step forward after moving on from Anthony Davis and trying to build a young core around Zion. And Zion never really truly turned into what we thought he was going to be out of Duke. It's almost like he blew through that shoe, and then that was the height of it. That was kind of it for Zion. You saw him literally compress floorboards, and then it was over. And maybe it's just because he was more powerful, he's bigger, larger than anyone in college basketball at that time. Now that he has, 1, underperformed, 2, never stayed healthy, and 3, now has these ugly off-court allegations, New Orleans is looking to pretty much start over. And one of the names that has been heavily linked, especially with odds, like Bovada came out, they have the Nuggets as the odds-on favorite to land Trey Murphy III, 6'8" small forward, averaged 25, 5, and 3 this year. Stellar defensive player. He's a D3 wing, right? That is, he doesn't shoot. I'm correct, KJ. I don't think he has as high of a 3-point percentage as MPJ does. And again, MPJ at 6'10", shooting 40%. Like, MPJ is a dead-eye 3-point shooter when he's healthy. And there are teams that would want that, but I heard Vic talking about this. If you were to move on from that contract, because you would have to move on from a big contract to bring Trey Murphy in, MPJ would have to likely be moved to a team that's just missing a dead-eye shooter. New Orleans, if they're moving on from these players, they're likely just starting over. MPJ is not a start-over player. Jamal Murray is not a start-over player if you're the new GM coming in here and trying to mix things up. I would love to get that guy. I think it'd be amazing if they're trying to clean house and you could bring a Kelly Olynyk in and have him be a backup 4 or 5 on the cheap. If you could bring in a Trey Murphy III and get some size and solid defense to go along with consistent scoring. I just don't know how you could do it.
Could you get him maybe a little bit more on the cheap? Do you know how his season ended? Season-ending surgery announced March 17th of 2025 for not just a torn labrum in his shoulder, which is basically what Michael Porter Jr. played with.
It was an AC joint injury, but
so if you ever have an AC joint, it always goes with a torn labrum.
Okay,
the two always go together. It's that, and you see that the separated shoulder. The labrum is what holds the capsule together. Getting a little sports med on you there, Bill. But he also had a partial.
What's a level 2 knee strain?
It's the one in between. It's between a level 1 and a level 3.
What's a level 3?
Yeah, it's not great. Level 1's not great either.
I think.
Yeah, neither one's great.
It's worse than being healthy.
It means you're hurt. But he also missed with a partial tear of his rotator cuff. And that you have like that's an injury. It's a surgery. Rotator cuff's a little bit more in terms of what potentially could happen over the term. You have to relearn shooting, dribbling, going up and play like as a shot blocker when you have a torn rotator cuff. It's a longer recovery time, much longer. And I actually think that might be good news for the Nuggets. Because he might not command as much on the open market as you think.
He's like a $25 million player.
And does any of that come down a little bit with recent injury history?
Probably not, because he's only 25.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. He probably continues to get way more expensive, and especially if he plays more games, right? The most games he's ever played in a season is 79 his sophomore year. He played 57 2 years ago. He played 53 last year before that mid-March or early March surgery that you mentioned. On the opposite side of the equation, you have MPJ, who doesn't miss games anymore, despite being this guy who is crowned as the most injury-prone player on the Nuggets. He just hasn't missed games in 3 years. He played through a crazy shoulder injury. He was not effective outside of 1.5 games, really, in terms of actually making an impact on the Nuggets winning in the postseason. But he doesn't miss games. Now, the question with this whole rumor mill is, when the new GM comes in, how much do you want to shake it up? Are you willing to just put out the same five and go with Adelman at the helm and with different rotations and playing 9, 10, 11 guys and Deron Holmes coming off of an Achilles injury, hoping to be what we drafted him to be? Will that change enough? Or if you want to shake things up, then be my guest, make this trade. But I don't know if MPJ, a 2031 first, because that's the first one that you can trade if I'm correct, and Peyton Watson is enough to get that guy. Right? Like, look at another lengthy wing guy that went at the deadline for 2 second-round picks. And he was rumored to be a really good fit here. DeAndre Hunter. 2 second-rounders. Trey Murphy is a way better player with a way higher ceiling than DeAndre Hunter is right now.
Trey Murphy, 6'8", 206 pounds, a scorer, but like you said, a tremendous defender. Would the Nuggets front office, whoever that may be, we'll find out here in the future, would they view him to be a bit of a redundant player if Deron Holmes ends up being who you think he is?
No, because Holmes fits more into a 4 and very much small ball stretch 5 type of guy.
You don't think Deron Holmes is a 5, do you? I know he's 6'10".
No, he's a 4, but if you're playing small, he can stretch into a 5 if you're playing small.
Yeah,
and
Trey Murphy
and Joker's on the bench.
Trey Murphy's not that guy.
No.
6'8".
No.
206.
He's a 3.
He's a scorer.
Small forward. You move MPJ out, you bring in Murphy, and he's your de facto starting 3. That's what would change here. But in order to make that happen, you have to part ways likely again, and this is the crapshoot of offseason trading, and especially with the NBA and having to force the contracts to match. If it's a bad contract, you have to, as this incoming GM, the first order of business is canvassing the rest of the league and figuring out what the value of Michael Porter Jr. is and Jamal Murray. Are they assets or are they debt? That's the first order of business as the new GM.
On the open market, do you think there's any question if they would be viewed as debt?
I don't think
with regards to their
I think
contracts.
for the right team, because there's only 2 years remaining in the MPJ contract. For the right team, MPJ can be looked at as an asset. I don't believe New Orleans is the right team, because if they're truly cleaning house, MPJ is not the right player to bring in. And you don't really have the requisite draft picks for a team that is looking to clean house and get younger and build through the draft, right? You can only trade at the earliest your 2031 first rounder. You don't have enough. You've shipped them out. Now you got a championship with it. That's awesome. Same thing with the Avs. Like the Avs don't have a draft pick in the first 3 rounds of this year or next year's NHL entry draft. You got a championship with it. And that gives you 5 years of goodwill, typically in the city, right? When did you sour on the Broncos after 2015? When did you start going, all right, enough's enough? 2019, right? This city gives you about 4 or 5 years after a championship to go, all right, let's get back to it now. Unless you're the Rockies, and then
you typically get some type of aging superstar that is acquired.
I have some stats. Hold on. I didn't get to this in the first segment. I had to put this on,
need
right?
A full season of KB.
So they are the worst team in the modern era, right? The fastest team to get to 50 losses in the modern era since 1901. There have been 2 teams in the history of the sport that have gotten to 50 losses faster, and that was pre-modern era. 2 teams. Those are the Kansas City Unions in 1884 and the Cincinnati Red Stockings, who were 7-50 through 57 games. Again, 1884 and 1886. Colorado was just becoming a state in 1876. Alexander Graham Bell, in March of 1876, filed the patent for the telephone. Professional baseball in the National League was literally created that year in 1876. Hasn't happened since baseball was created. Other things that happened. Budweiser was first brewed in the United States. General Custer died at Little Bighorn. He made his final stand. That happened the same year that a team lost 50 games faster than the Rockies. In 1884, the Oxford English Dictionary was first published. We didn't have the dictionary. It wasn't a thing. Well, versions of it, but Oxford wasn't a thing. the Statue of Liberty hadn't yet begun creation. And finally, Harry Truman and Eleanor Roosevelt were born.
Born.
That's that is how historically terrible. Baseball was created the year that, like, guys didn't know how to play the game. Professional baseball was created the last time a team was that bad. We didn't have telephones.
Was the wheel invented?
The wheel was invented.
We had
yes.
the wheel.
The wheel was the wheel. We were pushing wheels around with sticks.
No assembly line though. I'll tell you that.
No assembly
line.
line.
Henry wasn't quite rolling yet.
We're getting there. We're close.
Yeah,
we're getting there.
We're nearing that era.
Like, movie film hadn't yet been created by Edison. Coca-Cola wasn't a thing. And that was back when Coca-Cola was Coca-Cola. And the Federal Reserve was still like 35 years away from being created. Just blown away. To get back to it, I don't think you can trade for Trey Murphy. I wouldn't throw it away. But I think the only way that you could do it is MPJ, and I think you'd probably have to move on from Christian Braun's probably the guy. Because
it's the Raj scenario.
I've seen, and I know, and I don't love it. I don't love it.
Is Trey Murphy worth the void created by Christian Braun and Michael Porter Jr. not in your starting five?
Likely no. Likely not.
There's no way. You know how much scoring production you'd be making up right there?
The answer to that question is no. That one player does not fill the void, but with the extra money, could you go out and sign some players that could fill in as solid rotational pieces?
You got me fired up about Trey Murphy III. I'm excited.
I mean, you should be excited, but like, I don't think he's coming here.
Here's the one that
if you could trade for Murphy and Olynyk for Tyson, a future first in 2031, MPJ, and like Peyton Watson, I think I would entertain doing that. But I don't know if New Orleans would.
Maybe even a little bit more exciting to me is that the Raptors potentially want to have a massive rebuild and just truly hit the reset button and go out and acquire a big talent. And of course, the guy that's floating around right now is Giannis Antetokounmpo. Well, the Raptors aren't going to be the only team that's likely interested in Giannis. And Giannis is also probably a player that doesn't want to see 60% of his money go to the Canadian government to fund healthcare for several 100,000 people who live in the province somewhere randomly. You know who the Raptors might have interest in? Their own native son.
Oh.
Jamal Murray.
Oh. Who interests you in Toronto? RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes,
Grady Dick.
I do like how Grady Dick plays.
Can you imagine Grady Dick and Christian Braun in the starting lineup together? Be like
Kaz would have a field day.
There's a lot of Caucasians on the floor at once.
I'm not talking. I wasn't going down that road. I was going down
Nikola Jokic, who
I was about
European,
to say something, and I had a feeling I'd get fired if I decided to make that play call. So I'm not going to do that.
Brandon Ingram.
What's Ingram making?
A lot.
No, too much money. 41 million next year? No, sorry.
Grady Dick, man, small contract. Big name, small contract.
All right. We're getting out of here before we get too off balance.